Have you ever wanted to engineer a breed of super animals over the course of years through genetics?
It's my dream. I want to be Dr. Moreau.
You want to be Dr. Moreau. Well, this little simulator might allow you to do that. It's pretty cool if I do say so myself. Hey guys, this is Brax.
And this is Moriarty.
And today we're looking at Niche, a genetics survival game. From my understanding of it, after playing it for a little while, the goal is to breed animals in a way that makes them more superior over time, which will allow you to defend yourself against, other animals, which might be enemies, the climate that's around you, and just overall the environment that the game presents. The game is an interesting mixture between strategy, like real-time strategy, and simulation. What's odd about it to me is that you can only do 2 or 3 actions per day. So if you want to make sure your animal has food, you're going to need to gather food, but you can only gather 2 things a day, and then you have to wait another day, and then you can gather more food, or you can clear shrubbery so you can move forward. All the meantime, trying to find a way to find another animal to breed with to make sure that you guys are making little super babies.
Okay. It kind of seems like, are you building on these hexes, or...
The hexes have multiple different purposes. A lot of the time, when you start a map, or a level as it were, or a different world, I guess you could call it, everything will have weeds growing on it. And the first thing you have to do is clear the foliage out, and then you might find some shrubbery with some vegetation on it that you can collect food from. You can find someone to mate with, like you might find one of your partners, and you can continue to grow your animal family, as it were. You might even run into enemies. And after you clear that whole map area, and you've done all of that in each of these little squares or pentagons or whatever they are, once you've cleared all of those, you'll make it to another rock at the back of the level that you can interact with that takes you to another world. But by that point, this world is going to be much larger and it's going to be more difficult to navigate. You might run into more problems with enemies. It might be harder to find food. So basically, you need to spend time on each world making sure that you are evolving at a rate that will allow you to progress, or you might have an animal that you've raised once you move to the next world that isn't capable of surviving on that world.
That's actually understandable.
Yeah, it's evolution.
They're definitely not squares.
Okay.
And they're definitely not pentagons.
Well, I thought that any shape with 5 sides was a pentagon. Is that a hexagon then? They're hexagons.
That's clearly a hex. Yeah.
Well, it's my eyesight, not my understanding of geometry. Thank you very much.
I just feel like perhaps the American school system has failed us yet again, and you are evidence of that.
Well, look, I'm good with my colors, okay? I just never really got shapes very well.
So you're going to move through this world, clearing it and doing various things, finding pickups, which might be a mate or food or whatever, and just kind of going through it, and then moving to the next world. How much control do you actually have over the genetic growth of your creature?
That's what I was about to get into, because the way I've described it so far sounds pretty boring, right? In reality, it isn't that boring, because you have menus and interfaces that do allow you to track your genetic progression, and it isn't so much a matter of selecting attributes that you would want as it is breeding for those attributes, which is kind of realistic in the sense that certain breeds of dogs were bred for that particular purpose, right? You can do the same thing in this game. Like if you want to breed an animal that is good for fighting, but maybe they're not as good for other things that help them survive, you could do that. And it's really about managing your time and managing everything wisely. Like I said, that's the strategy part of it. The simulation part is how things change over time.
Are you always a cat?
Not all of the animals look identical, but I don't think they're supposed to be cats. I'm just not sure what they are supposed to be.
So what I heard from that is that, yes, you are always a cat.
Cat-like.
Okay. Now, I know you won't have played this game, but what this very vaguely reminds me of is a game called Spore, which came from Will Wright, who was the creator of The Sims and SimWorld and all of that stuff. And in this, you would genetically mix and match your creation over time using various points to give it more attack or more speed, making it an herbivore or making it eat meat or whatever. Going through all this stuff until eventually you would take it off into space and the game just stopped being any fun. But it seems to have a little bit of that, mostly because of the genetics part of it. So how in-depth can you really get with your creature? Can I make a purple cat?
Yes, you actually can. can affect the color of your animals. You can affect their eyesight, their fertility, things like that. And also, you can even make some of them albino. I do remember that being part of it, which I thought was pretty cool. And I'm assuming if I were to try to breed for an albino creature, that would take a while, right? Because that's such a uncommon genetic thing.
Well, albinism is recessive, so you have to have two people who have it, and then they would have to have... It's very difficult. Even if you had two people who were carriers, right, only a 25% chance that the child would have both of those recessive genes. So yes, it's very unlikely to have an albino child.
Well, the good news is maybe we can do it in the game and it would be easier, right?
I feel like it would be a lot easier to have an albino in a video game than to like actually make an albino. I feel like if we were to decide that what we're going to do is we're going to make an albino, it would take a lot of years and probably break a lot of laws.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'm up for it if that's what you're saying. I think it would be interesting to just like kidnap people and force them to breed into an albino, but I feel like perhaps it's easier to do in the game.
I don't know, but let's just concentrate on doing it in the game and not actually forcing people into albinism in real life.
I just think you could probably sell an albino baby for a lot of money.
You're a sick man. You're a very sick man. So what you were saying about Spore, this does sound similar to that, but in a way it sounds different because of the simulation part, and I have to keep making that clear. The simulation part incorporates a survival aspect into this, where you aren't just simply clicking on stuff on an interface to try to make sure that your children have a certain result. All the while, you have to survive. You have to feed yourself. You have to make sure you can defend yourself against enemies, and that adds an entirely new layer to the game because the genetics part of it is directly tied to the survival part of it. And say I'm like, oh, I want to go ahead and make an albino animal right now. Well, I probably need to make sure that I am breeding for things that can allow me to survive long enough to make it to that point. Like, albinism seems like a luxury thing that I would do in this game, after I had made sure that my animals could survive.
I understand, and I agree. Spore, while it was an interesting game, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here because I wanted to like Spore so much, and I remember Dark Spore even. I really wanted to enjoy these games, but they were really dumb. So you started off as like a little single-celled organism, and you ate other organisms. And if you ate green ones, you became a herbivore, and if you ate red ones, you became a carnivore. And then all of a sudden, you'd eat enough, sort of like agar.io or agario or agar.io, agar.io, however you pronounce that game, where you go and you just eat things to get bigger. But eventually you would get big enough that you would turn into a land creature. So you would jump out of the ocean and now you're a land creature. And then you have to give yourself legs and get rid of your tail. And then you were given an option, and your mission would be go eat 5 people or go befriend 5 people. And that was the whole mission. And depending on if you ate them or became friends with them, it would determine whether or not you were an aggressive species or if you were a friendly species. And then immediately you were at a technology age where you're building up cities and stuff. And then you had to build your entire planet full of cities because you've wiped everybody else out, being the most successful. And now you have to go to space. And that's when the game, again, immediately stopped being any fun whatsoever. And I think I'm not alone in saying that. So there was a lot of very interesting things there, but it just, I don't know, whatever.
So Spore seems to be a direct inspiration for the game. We can apparently agree on that. I'm going to take your word for it. All I can say about this game is that it does have enough depth, and it incorporates strategy in a way that does make it playable for an extended period of time, I think. Right now, they want $17.99 for it. I think that's a little on the expensive side for what I got out of the game personally, but like I just said, this seems like one of those games that has enough going on. I mean, there's like over 100 genes in this game. That gives you a lot to play with, right? So if you really get into this, I could see someone spending quite a few hours on it.
Sure. You know what else this reminds me of is a game called The Creatures. And that's another game you never would have played because, you know, you're not really a gamer. And that was one where you had a little baby cat or like maybe a dog. I think you could get a monkey and like it just ran around in a 2-story house and you had to train it and teach it stuff and like feed it. And it was one of the first 3D games I remember ever playing. It was a big thing at the time and it was a terrible game, but neither here nor there. So $18 $15 seems fair to me as well if it's the type of game you're interested in. If you hear, oh, it's Spore and the creatures, go for it, man.
Yeah, I would totally recommend it if you think that this is something you would spend some time in. If you guys are interested in it, you should check it out on Steam. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to watch another one of those videos in your face right now. This has been Brax.
And this is Moriarty.
And we'll see you guys on the next one.